At 2 p.m. on January 26, 1945, Second Lieutenant Audie Murphy crouched in a shallow foxhole near Holtzwihr, France, watching 6 German Panzer tanks come out from the tree line 1,000 yards in front of him. He was 19 years old, had been fighting for 18 months straight, and had already killed over 240 German soldiers. The German army had sent 6 tanks and about 250 soldiers to take back the area near the woods. Murphy knew what usually happened. German tanks always came first. Soldiers followed behind wearing white winter uniforms to blend in with the snow, and American positions always fell apart when the Panzers got too close. But not today. Company B, 15th Infantry Regiment, was defending this frozen clearing with exactly 40 men. The temperature was 14 degrees Fahrenheit. Snow covered everything. Murphy's backup soldiers had not arrived yet. The 2nd Battalion, 30th Regiment, was still on its way. Hold the position. Those were his orders. 1 lieutenant, 40 soldiers against 250 German soldiers, and 6 tanks. The numbers looked really bad. Company B had lost 102 soldiers the day before. Every officer except Murphy had been hurt or killed. The 40 men left were all that remained of a full-strength rifle company that should have had 187 soldiers. They had worked all night trying to dig foxholes in the frozen ground. The soldiers couldn't make any progress. The ground was too hard. Murphy had placed 2 M10 tank destroyers from the 61st Tank Destroyer Battalion along a narrow dirt road leading into the woods. Each M10 was a modified M4 Sherman tank body. It was 19 feet 7 inches long, 10 feet wide, and weighed 29,937 kilograms. It was powered by 2 GMC 6046 diesel engines that made 375 horsepower total. The open-top turret had a 3-inch M7 gun that could punch through 76 millimeters of armor from 1,000 yards away. Maximum speed was 30 miles per hour on roads. Each tank destroyer also had a Browning M250 caliber machine gun mounted on the turret to shoot at aircraft. Murphy also had 5 armored half-tracks positioned in a rough defensive curve, but he could see the German force getting ready to attack. 6 tanks. That meant Panzer IVs or Panthers. Both were better than the M10 in armor and gunpowder. The Panther's 75mm gun could punch through an M10 from 2,000 yards away. The M10 needed to get much closer to have any chance. If the German tanks broke through, they would roll right over Murphy's positions. The soldiers following would sweep through the woods. Behind Murphy's position were the headquarters of the entire 3rd Infantry Division, battalion command posts, supply storage areas, and artillery positions. The division was spread thin across the Colmar Pocket. There were no backup troops. If Company B broke, the entire American line would collapse. The bigger picture was even more important. The Colmar Pocket was the last German position on French soil. The German army had 20,000 troops here, threatening the American 7th Army's side. If the Germans broke out, they could hit General Patton's 3rd Army from behind. They could possibly recapture Strasbourg. They could make the war last months longer. Every American general, from Eisenhower down, wanted the Colmar Pocket eliminated. Murphy had studied the area. The clearing ahead was like a natural trap. It was 400 yards wide and 600 yards deep with no cover. But his men were too few and too exposed. The German soldiers wore white winter uniforms to blend in. Murphy's men wore standard olive-green uniforms, dark targets against white snow. At 1:58 p.m., Murphy made a phone call to battalion headquarters. He asked for the artillery fire he had planned earlier. Fire mission able. The coordinates were already calculated. The fire control center said okay. Batteries ready. Murphy had 8 105mm howitzer cannons from the 3rd Division artillery ready to fire. Each gun could fire 10 shells per minute. That meant 80 shells per minute, but only if Murphy could keep the phone line working and give accurate information about where to shoot. The German artillery attack started at 2 p.m. Shells exploded all across Murphy's positions. 1 shell hit the tree next to a machine gun nest, with splinters killed 2 soldiers instantly. Another shell hit the leftmost M10 tank destroyer. Direct hit. The vehicle burst into flames. The crew jumped out and ran for the woods. Murphy watched the 6 German tanks moving forward. They moved slowly and carefully. Soldiers followed 50 yards behind in squad-sized groups. The Germans were confident. They had much more firepower. They had more soldiers. They had momentum. If you want to see how Murphy held off 250 German soldiers and 6 Panzer tanks with a 50 caliber machine gun on a burning tank destroyer, please hit that like button. It helps us share more forgotten stories. Subscribe if you haven't already. Murphy gave the order at 2:02 p.m. His men would pull back to defensive positions 150 yards back along the tree line. The clearing ahead would become a killing zone, but someone needed to stay forward and tell the artillery where to shoot. Someone needed to keep the phone line working. Murphy stayed at his command post, a shallow dip in the frozen ground. There was no real protection. The field telephone sat on a wooden ammunition box. A single wire ran back 200 yards to the battalion communications trench. That wire was now the only connection to the artillery batteries. Murphy picked up the phone at 2:03 p.m. Fire mission able. Start firing. The fire control center responded right away. 8 105mm guns fired together. The shells took 18 seconds to travel from the gun positions to the target area. Murphy counted. The first group of shells landed 600 yards ahead, right on the German gathering area. Smoke and snow exploded upward. He called for changes. Lower 100, right 50. The German tanks kept moving forward. Distance, 800 yards. Now, their turrets turned, looking for targets. Murphy's men had pulled back. The German tank crews saw an empty American position. Murphy watched through binoculars. The German soldiers followed close behind the tanks. Too close. This was textbook combined arms training. The soldiers protected the tanks from close attacks. The tanks provided mobile firepower for the soldiers. The German army had perfected this at the beginning of the war. They were using it again. At 2:07 p.m., the German tanks reached 600 yards. Murphy could see their markings now. Panzer IVs. 5 of them were definitely Panzer 4H models. They had long-barreled 75mm guns. Front armor was 80mm thick. The 6th might be a Panther. It was harder to tell in the snow and smoke. The burning M10 on Murphy's left sat 40 yards away, still smoking. Still in danger of exploding completely if the ammunition inside heated up and blew up. The crew had left it, but Murphy saw something. The 50 caliber machine gun was still mounted on the turret. The ammunition boxes were still attached. The M2 Browning 50 caliber machine gun was 65 inches long and weighed 84 pounds. It was belt-fed and air-cooled. It used recoil to operate. Rate of fire was 450 to 550 rounds per minute. Effective range was 1,800 meters against people and 1,000 meters against light vehicles. It was fed by metal link belts that came apart. Each belt held 105 rounds. Standard ammunition included armor-piercing, tracer, and regular rounds. The German tanks reached 400 yards at 2:09 p.m. Murphy made a decision. His command post position was falling apart. German tank fire had knocked out his second M10. The crew jumped out and ran for the tree line. Small arms fire from German soldiers cracked overhead. Murphy's field telephone still worked. The wires still connected to battalion. He grabbed the phone. He crawled toward the burning M10. The heat was really strong, even from 10 yards away. Black smoke poured from the engine area. Flames licked around the turret base. The vehicle could explode at any moment. Murphy climbed onto the back deck at 2:10 p.m. The 50 caliber sat on its stand, still working. Murphy swung it toward the advancing Germans. He checked the ammunition feed. One belt loaded, 105 rounds. 4 additional ammunition boxes sat in their storage spots. 420 more rounds. Total, 525 rounds. Murphy positioned himself behind the gun. The Germans were 350 yards away now. The smoke from the burning tank destroyer gave him some cover, but the heat was becoming too much to handle. Murphy could feel it through his uniform. The metal deck was hot enough to burn through his boots. He pressed the butterfly trigger. The M2 roared to life. Muzzle velocity was 2,910 feet per second. The armor-piercing rounds could punch through 23 millimeters of armor at 500 yards. Not enough for the tanks, but devastating against soldiers. Murphy fired in short bursts. 3-second bursts, 23 rounds per burst at 450 rounds per minute. He moved the gun left to right, covering the advancing soldiers. Germans fell. Others dove for cover. But they kept coming. The German soldiers reached a drainage ditch at 2:13 p.m. distance, 300 yards. They were frantically talking, probably discussing their next attack movement. Murphy could see them clearly now through the smoke. White camouflage uniforms and P-40 submachine guns, stick grenades, squad leaders pointing toward his position. Murphy adjusted his aim. He pressed the trigger. The 50 caliber rounds tore through the drainage ditch position. Bodies fell. The ditch turned red. Murphy had used 125 rounds. He had 400 remaining. The field telephone cord stretched from the burning tank destroyer back to his original command post, then back to the communications trench. Murphy held the phone between his shoulder and ear while firing the machine gun. He called fire corrections. Lower 50. Fire for effect. The artillery kept pounding the German back positions. At 2:16 p.m., the German tanks pushed forward. 5 Panzer IVs and 1 Panther. They began firing their main guns at Murphy's position. 75mm shells exploded around the burning M10. The explosions were deafening. One round hit 15 feet away. The explosion threw frozen dirt across Murphy's position. Shrapnel pinged off the tank destroyer's hull. The Germans couldn't see Murphy clearly. The smoke from the burning engine created a moving curtain that hid him. When the wind pushed the smoke away, Murphy was exposed. When it swirled back, he disappeared. This uncertainty saved his life over and over. German machine gunners fired at where they thought he was, not where he actually was. Murphy's legs began going numb from the cold and from standing in his firing position. The temperature stayed at 14 degrees. He had been standing on the burning tank destroyer for 6 minutes. 6 minutes of continuous exposure to enemy fire from 3 sides. Germans in front. Germans moving around his right side. Germans trying to work around his left through a shallow draw. The ammunition counter on the M2 showed 280 rounds remaining at 2:18 p.m. Murphy had fired 245 rounds in 8 minutes. Careful fire, short bursts. Each burst had a target. No wasted ammunition. A German squad tried a flanking move on Murphy's right at 2:19 p.m. They came out from a small fold in the ground. Distance, 75 yards. Murphy turned a 50 caliber and fired. For second burst, 31 rounds. The squad went down, some dead, some wounded. The survivors crawled back. Murphy's right leg got hit by shrapnel at 2:20 p.m. A German tank round had exploded nearby. Hot metal pieces tore through his boot and into his calf muscle. Blood soaked his wool pants. He ignored it. He kept firing. The German tanks reached 200 yards at 2:21 p.m. point-blank range for their 75mm main guns. Murphy could see the commanders in their open hatches. The lead Panzer IV fired. The muzzle flash was huge at this distance. The shell screamed past Murphy's position and exploded in the woods behind him. Murphy called artillery on his own position at 2:22 p.m. Fire on my coordinates. Danger close. The fire control center hesitated. The battalion commander got on the line. Confirm your request. Murphy confirmed. Fire on my coordinates. The Germans are right on top of me. The artillery fire moved forward. Shells began landing 100 yards ahead of Murphy's position. German soldiers scattered. Some died in the explosions. Others ran back toward their own lines. But the tanks kept coming. At 2:24 p.m., a second German squad tried the right flank again. Same approach, different result. Murphy was ready. He fired the moment they appeared. 3-second burst, 23 rounds. All 8 men in the squad went down. The 50 caliber at this distance was impossible to survive. The heavy bullets tore through multiple soldiers. One round could kill 2 men if they were lined up. Murphy's ammunition counter showed 180 rounds remaining. He had one belt loaded, most of it used up, 3 full belts in the storage boxes. He would need to reload soon. Reloading would take at least 15 seconds. 15 seconds of not firing. 15 seconds for the Germans to move forward unchecked. The situation was changing. Murphy had been firing for 14 minutes. He had killed at least 40 German soldiers by his own count, probably more. The German advance had stopped. The tanks couldn't push forward without soldiers to support them. The soldiers couldn't move forward without the tanks providing covering fire. Murphy had created a deadlock. But ammunition doesn't last forever. At 2:26 p.m., Murphy reloaded the .50 caliber for the first time. He grabbed a fresh 105-round belt from the storage box. His hands were shaking, not from fear, but from the cold and from gripping the gun's handles for 16 continuous minutes. He fed the new belt into the weapon's feed area. He closed the cover. He charged the weapon. Total time, 12 seconds. The Germans used those 12 seconds. A fresh platoon, maybe 30 soldiers, rushed forward from a covered position Murphy hadn't spotted. They moved forward in a loose line. Distance, 250 yards when Murphy saw them. Distance, 200 yards when he opened fire. Murphy fired continuously now. Long bursts, 6-second, 7-second bursts, 46 rounds per burst. The Germans went down in groups. The snow turned dark with blood, but they kept coming. German discipline was excellent. These were veterans from the Eastern Front. They had survived Stalingrad, Kursk, and the retreat across Poland. They knew how to fight. At 2:29 p.m., a German machine gun team set up 400 yards away. MG-42. Rate of fire, 1,200 rounds per minute. They opened fire on Murphy's position. Tracer bullets snapped past his head. Bullets sparked off the M10's hull. Murphy couldn't stop them and fight the advancing soldiers at the same time. He made a choice. He called artillery on the machine gun position. Target reference point Charlie. Fire for effect. 8 105mm howitzers fired. The shells landed on target. The MG-42 went silent. Murphy's ammunition counter showed 75 rounds at 2:31 p.m. He had 210 rounds remaining in storage boxes. Total, 285 rounds. He had fired 240 rounds in 21 minutes. At his current rate, he had perhaps 12 more minutes of ammunition. The German tanks pushed forward again at 2:32 p.m. They had reorganized. 3 tanks side by side, moving slowly. The commanders closed their hatches. They were taking Murphy seriously now. Distance, 150 yards. The burning M10 beneath Murphy's feet was becoming critical. The ammunition stored inside the vehicle was heating up and going off. Small explosions popped inside the turret. The heat was intense. Murphy's uniform was smoking. The paint on the .50 caliber's barrel was blistering. The weapon itself was overheating from continuous fire. At 2:34 p.m., a German soldier got within 10 yards of Murphy's position. Murphy didn't see him until the last second. The German carried a Panzerfaust anti-tank weapon. Effective range, 60 meters. One shot could destroy the M10 completely. Murphy swung the .50 caliber down and to his right. Maximum angle downward. He fired point blank. 1 second burst, 8 rounds. The German soldier was torn apart. The Panzerfaust fell into the snow without exploding. Murphy's hands were burned. The handles of the .50 caliber were hot from continuous firing. The metal had gotten hot from the barrel. Murphy's gloves had burned through. His palms were blistering. He kept firing. At 2:36 p.m., the ammunition counter hit 0. Murphy reloaded again. His third belt. 2 belts remaining after this. 210 rounds total. The Germans saw him reloading. They charged. Maybe 40 soldiers, all moving at once. Distance, 175 yards. Murphy loaded faster this time. 10 seconds. He opened fire before the charging Germans got within 150 yards. He fired in long, sweeping bursts. The .50 caliber cut through the German ranks like a blade. Men fell in rows. The charge collapsed. Survivors crawled back or lay still in the snow, pretending to be dead. At 2:39 p.m., something changed. The German tanks stopped moving forward. Murphy had been firing for 29 minutes continuously. He had killed over 80 German soldiers by count, probably closer to 100. The German soldiers were refusing to move forward. Murphy could see German officers trying to get their men to attack. Some soldiers obeyed. Most stayed down. The situation had shifted. Murphy's steady, accurate fire had broken the German attack. The Panzer commanders could see their soldier support disappearing. Tanks without soldier support were in danger. The Germans had learned this lesson in Russia. They weren't eager to push forward alone. Murphy's ammunition counter showed 55 rounds remaining at 2:41 p.m. He had 105 more rounds in the last belt. Total, 160 rounds. He had fired 365 rounds in 31 minutes. The 50 caliber barrel was glowing dull red at the end. Smoke rose from the receiver. The weapon was close to breaking completely from overheating. But Murphy kept firing. Short bursts now, 2-second bursts, saving ammunition, keeping the Germans down, preventing them from organizing another attack. At 2:43 p.m., the Germans made their final attempt. Every remaining soldier who could fight stood up at the same time. Over 100 men. They charged across the entire front. No organization, no movement pattern, just a desperate rush toward Murphy's position. Murphy loaded his final ammunition belt at 2:44 p.m., the last 105 rounds. He opened fire immediately. The 50 caliber hammered without pause. Murphy moved the gun from left to right, then back again. He fired where the Germans were thickest. Every burst knocked down multiple soldiers. The distance closed, 150 yards, 125 yards, 100 yards. Germans were falling everywhere. But some kept coming. Murphy fired continuously. The barrel was white-hot now. The wooden front grip was smoking. Murphy couldn't touch it. He held only the back handles, which were also burning through his destroyed gloves. At 2:46 p.m., Murphy's field telephone rang. Battalion commander on the line. Murphy, get off that tank destroyer. It's going to explode. That's an order. Murphy ignored the order. He kept firing. The ammunition counter hit 50 rounds at 2:47 p.m. The German charge was failing. Most of the attacking soldiers were down, dead, wounded, or taking cover. But small groups kept trying. 5 men here, 8 men there. Murphy shot at each group as they appeared. The German tanks finally pulled back at 2:48 p.m. All 6 panzers reversed, backing toward the German lines. The panzer commanders had seen enough. Their soldier support was destroyed. The attack had failed. Continuing forward meant exposing their thinner back and side armor to American anti-tank weapons. Murphy's ammunition counter hit 0 at 2:49 p.m. He had fired all 525 rounds. The 50 caliber barrel was glowing orange. The weapon wouldn't work anymore. Murphy climbed down from the burning tank destroyer at 2:50 p.m. The moment his boots hit the ground, the M10's internal ammunition storage exploded. The entire vehicle exploded upward. The turret flew 30 feet into the air. The hull split open. If Murphy had stayed on the tank destroyer for 10 more seconds, he would have been blown apart. Murphy limped toward the American lines. His right leg was bleeding heavily from the shrapnel wound. His hands were burned. His face was black with smoke and gunpowder. His uniform was scorched. He had been standing on a burning tank destroyer for 40 minutes, exposed to enemy fire from 3 directions, firing continuously with a heavy machine gun. American soldiers came out from the tree line at 2:52 p.m. They had watched the entire fight. They couldn't believe Murphy was alive. Sergeant Elmer Brawley reached Murphy first. "Sir, you need a medic." Murphy shook his head. "Get ready. They might come again." But the Germans didn't come again. Murphy's one-man stand had broken their attack completely. The German army pulled back to their starting positions. The clearing fell silent, except for the moaning of wounded German soldiers scattered across 400 yards of frozen ground. At 2:55 p.m., Murphy organized a counterattack. Despite his wounds, despite his exhaustion, he led Company B forward. The 40 remaining soldiers moved forward across the clearing. They ran into very little resistance. The Germans were finished. Their attack had cost them over 120 dead and wounded soldiers. 6 tanks had pulled back. The German army had nothing left. Murphy's counterattack pushed the Germans back into the woods beyond the clearing. By 3:20 p.m., Company B had gotten back all lost ground and set up defensive positions 200 yards forward of their original line. The German threat was gone. Murphy finally accepted medical help at 3:25 p.m. A battalion aid station was set up in a farmhouse 300 yards behind the lines. The medic examined Murphy's leg wound. Shrapnel pieces were stuck in the calf muscle. The medic wanted to send Murphy to the rear. Murphy refused. "I'm staying with my company." The battalion commander arrived. "Lieutenant, that's not a request. You're wounded. You need proper medical care." Murphy still refused. "Sir, if the Germans attack again, my men need their commander." The battalion commander saw Murphy's determination. "Fine, get your leg bandaged. But if it gets infected, I'm personally carrying you to the aid station." Murphy agreed. The medic cleaned and wrapped the wound. Murphy walked back to Company B at 3:40 p.m. The numbers of the fight were clear. 1 man, 1 machine gun, 40 minutes of continuous fire. 525 rounds used. Over 50 Germans killed by Murphy personally. Another 70 wounded. The German attack broken completely. The American line held. The Colmar pocket secured. Company B stayed in position through the night. The Germans never attacked again. The German army had learned a lesson. Some positions couldn't be taken. Some soldiers couldn't be broken. Some stands were impossible to beat. January 27th, 1945, 8 a.m., divisional intelligence officers arrived at Company B's position. They wanted details. Captain Walter E. Fellman, S2, of the 15th Infantry Regiment, interviewed Murphy personally. The questions were exact. How many Germans? How many killed? How long did you fire? Where did you fire from? Murphy gave exact answers. He guessed 250 German soldiers in the attacking force. He counted over 50 bodies directly in front of his position. Artillery observers estimated another 70 German casualties from indirect fire. The total German casualty count was about 120 soldiers. The 6 German tanks had pulled back without being destroyed, but they never returned. Intelligence confirmed Murphy's story through multiple sources. American observers from battalion had watched the fight through binoculars. Artillery forward observers had watched the entire action while calling fire missions. Other soldiers from Company B gave matching testimony. Every account matched. The destroyed M10 tank destroyer was examined at 10 a.m. Weapons specialists from the 601st Tank Destroyer Battalion looked at the damage. The vehicle was a total loss. The engine area had burned completely. The ammunition had exploded. The turret was destroyed. But remarkably, the 50 caliber machine gun mount was still attached. The weapon itself had survived, though the barrel was warped from overheating. Ballistics experts examined the weapon. The barrel showed extreme heat stress. The rifling was partially melted. The receiver showed signs of metal fatigue. The weapon had fired way beyond what it was designed for. A standard M2 Browning could fire at 40 rounds per minute forever. Murphy had averaged 13 rounds per minute for 40 minutes, but in bursts that reached 450 rounds per minute. The weapon should have broken. It didn't. At 12 o'clock noon, General Alexander Patch, commanding the 7th Army, visited Murphy's position. Patch wanted to see the battlefield personally. He walked across the clearing with Murphy. German bodies still lay in the snow. American graves teams were working to collect the dead. Patch stopped at the burned M10. He looked at the machine gun mount. He asked Murphy one question. "Why didn't you pull back with your men?" Murphy's answer was simple. "Someone had to stay and tell the artillery where to shoot, sir. And someone had to keep the Germans off my men while they pulled back." Patch recommended Murphy for the Medal of Honor on January 28th. The recommendation moved through the system with unusual speed. Murphy had already received the Distinguished Service Cross, 2 Silver Stars, 2 Bronze Stars, and 3 Purple Hearts. He was already the most decorated soldier in the 3rd Infantry Division. The Medal of Honor would make him the most decorated American soldier of World War II. On February 14th, Murphy's wounds were finally judged serious enough to require evacuation. The leg wound had become infected despite treatment. He was sent to a rear area hospital. He protested. He wanted to stay with Company B. His protests were overruled. Murphy spent 3 weeks in a hospital. He returned to his unit on March 8th. By then, the 3rd Infantry Division had pushed deep into Germany. The war was getting close to ending. Murphy got orders moving him to liaison duties. The Army didn't want to risk its newest Medal of Honor recipient in more combat. Murphy received the Medal of Honor on June 2nd, 1945, in a ceremony in France. He was 20 years old. The citation read, Second Lieutenant Audie Murphy commanded Company B, which was attacked by 6 tanks and waves of infantry. Second Lieutenant Murphy ordered his men to pull back to prepared positions in the woods while he remained forward at his command post and continued to give fire directions to the artillery by telephone. Behind him, to his right, one of our tank destroyers got a direct hit and began to burn. Its crew pulled back to the woods. Second Lieutenant Murphy continued to direct artillery fire, which killed large numbers of the advancing enemy infantry. With the enemy tanks right next to his position, Second Lieutenant Murphy climbed on the burning tank destroyer, which was in danger of blowing up at any moment, and used its .50 caliber machine gun against the enemy. The citation continued. He was alone and exposed to German fire from 3 sides, but his deadly fire killed dozens of Germans and caused their infantry attack to stop. The enemy tanks, losing infantry support, began to fall back. For an hour, the Germans tried every available weapon to eliminate Second Lieutenant Murphy, but he continued to hold his position and wiped out a squad that was trying to sneak up on his right side. Germans got as close as 10 yards, only to be cut down by his fire. He got a leg wound, but ignored it and continued the single-handed fight until his ammunition ran out. He then made his way to his company, refused medical attention, and organized the company in a counterattack, which forced the Germans to pull back. The action at Holtzwihr on January 26, 1945, was a turning point in the Colmar Pocket campaign. The German counterattack, if successful, would have broken through the American lines. Division headquarters, artillery positions, and supply storage areas would have been overrun. The 3rd Infantry Division would have been forced to pull back. The entire American attack in the Colmar region would have stopped. Strategic analysts later figured out the consequences. A German breakthrough at Holtzwihr would have delayed the clearing of the Colmar Pocket by at least 2 weeks. That delay would have allowed the German army to move reinforcements from other areas. The American advance into Germany would have been slowed. The war could have been extended. Murphy's stand prevented all of this. 1 man, 1 machine gun, 40 minutes of fire. The strategic impact was enormous. The Colmar Pocket was cleared by February 9, 1945. The last German forces on French soil were eliminated. The American 7th Army and French 1st Army could now focus entirely on the invasion of Germany. The tactical lessons were studied extensively. Murphy's action showed several principles. First, how effective a single heavy machine gun could be in a defensive position. The M2 Browning .50 caliber proved devastating against soldiers at ranges under 400 yards. Second, the importance of artillery coordination. Murphy's continuous fire direction kept 8 105mm howitzers firing throughout the fight. The combination of direct fire from the .50 caliber and indirect fire from the artillery created an impassable killing zone. Third, and most importantly, Murphy's action showed that having more soldiers could be negated by better positioning, better fire control, and better determination. The Germans had 6 tanks and 250 soldiers. Murphy had 1 machine gun. The Germans should have 1. They didn't. Company B's casualties on January 26th were minimal. 2 soldiers killed, 7 wounded. All casualties happened before Murphy climbed onto the tank destroyer. Once Murphy began firing, American casualties stopped. His covering fire allowed his men to pull back safely. His steady fire prevented the Germans from moving forward. His final counterattack drove the Germans back completely. Murphy's Medal of Honor was one of 464 awarded during World War II. But his action at Holtzwihr was unique. No other Medal of Honor action involved a single soldier holding off such a large force for such a long time while standing on a burning vehicle in danger of exploding at any moment. The 3rd Infantry Division put together statistics on Murphy's military career. He had fought in campaigns in North Africa, Sicily, Italy, France, and Germany. He had fought in 7 major beach landings. He had been wounded 3 times. He had killed or wounded over 240 enemy soldiers. He had destroyed 6 tanks and several machine gun nests. He had captured or helped capture over 300 enemy soldiers. Murphy's total decorations eventually numbered 33. In addition to the Medal of Honor, he received the Distinguished Service Cross, 2 Silver Stars, the Legion of Merit, 2 Bronze Stars with V device for valor, 3 Purple Hearts, the Good Conduct Medal, and many campaign and service medals. France gave him the Legion of Honor and the Croix de Guerre with Palm. Belgium gave him the Croix de Guerre. The M10 tank destroyer that Murphy stood on was never recovered. It burned completely and was scrapped on site. No photographic evidence of Murphy's action exists. The fight happened too quickly and too close to the front lines for combat photographers to reach the scene. The 50 caliber machine gun was recovered and sent to weapons specialists for analysis. After examination, it was declared unusable due to barrel damage and excessive wear. The weapon was scrapped. No effort was made to save it for historical purposes. The battlefield at Holtzwihr is now farmland. A small marker shows the approximate location of Murphy's action. The marker was placed in 1948 by the 3rd Infantry Division Association. It reads, "Near this spot on January 26, 1945, Second Lieutenant Audie Murphy, Company B, 15th Infantry Regiment, 3rd Infantry Division, United States Army, held off an attack by 6 German tanks and 250 infantry, killing or wounding more than 50 enemy soldiers. For this action, he was awarded the Medal of Honor." Murphy's story became widely known after the war. Life magazine featured him on its cover in July 1945. The headline read, "Most Decorated Soldier." James Cagney saw the cover and invited Murphy to Hollywood. Murphy didn't want to go at first. He had no interest in becoming an actor, but he needed money. His family in Texas was struggling financially. Murphy's acting career lasted from 1948 to 1969. He appeared in 44 films, mostly westerns. His most successful film was To Hell and Back in 1955, based on his autobiography. Murphy played himself in the film. The movie was Universal Pictures' highest-grossing film until Jaws in 1975. But Murphy struggled with post-traumatic stress. He had trouble sleeping, had nightmares, and felt depressed. He became addicted to sleeping pills. He was one of the first public figures to speak openly about combat-related PTSD. He pushed for better treatment of veterans with psychological wounds. Murphy died in a plane crash on May 28, 1971. He was 45 years old. He was buried with full military honors at Arlington National Cemetery. His grave is the 2nd most visited site at Arlington after President Kennedy's. The numbers at Holtzwihr were clear from the beginning. 6 German tanks, 250 German soldiers versus 40 American soldiers in shallow foxholes on frozen ground. The Germans should have won in 15 minutes. Murphy changed the equation. 1 man, 1 machine gun, 525 rounds of ammunition. But more than that, 1 man willing to stand on a burning vehicle in danger of exploding. 1 man willing to expose himself to enemy fire from 3 directions. 1 man willing to ignore wounds, ignore burns, ignore exhaustion to protect his soldiers. The lessons of Holtzwihr went beyond military tactics. Murphy showed principles that applied to any extreme situation. First, training matters. Murphy had been in combat for 18 months continuously. He knew how to fire the M2 Browning. He knew how to call artillery. He knew how to read a battlefield. His training had become instinct. Second, positioning matters. Murphy chose the burning tank destroyer because it was the only position that could cover the entire clearing. It was the worst position from a safety perspective. It was the best position from a tactical perspective. Murphy understood the difference. Third, discipline matters. Murphy fired in short, controlled bursts. He saved ammunition. He picked targets carefully. Under extreme stress, with Germans charging his position, with tanks firing at him, with shrapnel hitting around him, Murphy kept his fire discipline. That discipline made the difference between 40 minutes of effective fire and 10 minutes of panic fire, followed by an empty gun. Fourth, courage matters. Not the absence of fear, but the willingness to act despite fear. Murphy was terrified. His hands were shaking. His legs were numb. He knew he was probably going to die. He acted anyway. The story of Audie Murphy reminds us what individual action can do. In an age of mass warfare, industrial-scale destruction, and million-man armies, one person still mattered. One person with a machine gun and determination changed the course of a battle. That battle affected a campaign. That campaign affected the war. Murphy never thought of himself as a hero. He gave credit to his training, his officers, his men. He said the real heroes were the ones who didn't come home. He wore his medals reluctantly. He avoided publicity when he could. He understood that warfare wasn't glorious. It was necessary sometimes, but never glorious. The 3rd Infantry Division continued fighting until May 8, 1945, when Germany surrendered. The division had fought for 531 consecutive days of combat, longer than any other American division in Europe. The division suffered 27,452 casualties. Murphy's Company B suffered an 800% casualty rate, meaning the company's roster was replaced 8 complete times during the war. Murphy's post-war struggles showed the cost of combat. He survived physically, but carried psychological wounds for the rest of his life. He spoke publicly about his nightmares, his inability to sleep without a loaded pistol under his pillow, his struggles with anger and depression. His speaking out helped remove some of the shame around PTSD. The M2 Browning 50 caliber machine gun that Murphy used at Holtzwihr continued service in some form for decades. The basic design, created by John Moses Browning in 1921, stayed in service into the 21st century. American forces used 50 caliber machine guns in Korea, Vietnam, Iraq, and Afghanistan. The weapon Murphy fired in 1945 was mechanically the same as weapons being fired 70 years later. The 3rd Infantry Division continues to serve. Based at Fort Stewart, Georgia, the division went to Iraq in 2003 and fought there and in Afghanistan. The division keeps Murphy's memory alive. A building at Fort Stewart is named in his honor. His Medal of Honor and other decorations are displayed in the Division Museum. If this story moved you the way it moved us, do me a favor. Hit that like button. Every single like tells YouTube to show this story to more people. Hit subscribe and turn on notifications. We're rescuing forgotten stories from dusty archives every single week. Drop a comment right now and tell us where you're watching from. Are you watching from the United States, United Kingdom, Canada, Australia? Tell us your location. Tell us if someone in your family served. Share this video with someone who needs to hear this story. You're not just a viewer. You're part of keeping these memories alive. Thank you for watching, and thank you for making sure Audie Leon Murphy doesn't disappear into silence.